My next guest is a historian and a constitutional scholar active in the area of constitutional history. She's the author of 8 books, most recently, The Tragedy of Benedict Arnold, An American Life. But I want to talk to her about a book she published back in 2002 called Guns and Violence, The English Experience. She's taught at a number of places, including Princeton, Bentley, BU, Northeastern University, Cambridge, also George Mason School of Law. Website is joyceleemalcolm.com. Please welcome to the program Professor Joyce Lee Malcolm. Professor, how are you?
Fine. Thank you very much for inviting me.
We have not talked in a long time. Do you remember the last time we talked?
I don't remember the last time, no. It's been a while.
I did a documentary, Joyce Lee, about 20 years ago called Michael and Me, and I interviewed you about your comparison of the English setting and the American setting when, I think for a period of maybe 100 years or so, I could get that wrong, neither country had any real stringent gun control laws, and your conclusion was that our society was more violent. Presence or absence of guns didn't make much of a difference. We were just a more violent society, and you cannot attribute the violence to the presence of guns, given the way England didn't have any real gun control, and our populations are pretty much kind of the same.
Yeah, it was a big surprise to me because when England didn't have any gun laws, any strict gun rules at all, and there were a lot of guns, they had almost no gun crime. And actually, as they started to put in gun regulations, they always claimed that it was to prevent crime. But in fact, that wasn't the case because there was very little. Whereas we have had this tradition of a lot of homicides with guns and with knives and other things for hundreds of years. And we can only, suggest some reasons why the difference in these two populations, but it was certainly didn't have anything to do with whether guns were available or not.
The book we're referring to is called Guns and Violence, The English Experience. It was published in 2002. Last night, Joyce Lee, I'm watching television, I think it was CNN, and some cop, a police chief, was in the UK, and he said, I picked up a newspaper and I read an article about a stabbing spree, and I said to myself, I only wish in America this could be the level of crime we have. When you hear someone say something like that, what's your reaction?
It's so bizarre. In fact, there are a lot of stabbings here as well as shootings. And, it doesn't matter which weapon you use in a sense. If you kill somebody, it is nothing to congratulate oneself on or look forward to. I don't think that gun measures would make any difference. I mean, the fact is that we have a great many gun control laws on the books, and they are not regularly enforced strictly, or they are unable to be enforced. And this past year, with so much violence going on in the cities with riots and so forth and calls to defund the police, the records of numbers of people applying in this country to buy guns is just set new records every single month. Every single month in 2020 was higher than 2019, which was already high. So all that gun regulations seem to do is to inspire more people to make sure they can protect themselves in this country. And in England, it's too late to do that. They have so much restriction on not only guns but all kinds of other weapons. And they've been debating banning knives that have points. So maybe that's why the knife attack was so shocking. I mean, anything that you can use to protect yourself is virtually now considered an offensive weapon and is illegal.
My guest is Joyce Lee Malcolm, again, author of the book Guns and Violence, The English Experience. What do you think is the end game of the gun controllers? Do you really believe that they want to abolish the Second Amendment, or do you really believe that they think that there are so-called common sense things, close quote, that we can do that would reduce gun violence?
Oh, they want to abolish the Second Amendment. And the right of individuals to be armed. And as far as they're concerned, only the police and the military should have weapons, and maybe the security guards who protect them. But I think that's obviously the end game. I was a part of a congressional hearing before Gerald Nadler's Senate committee last year, and there was someone from the Brady Committee there talking about their plans for controlling guns, and every time that they brought up some measure that would ban guns, she said that that was a good first step. I mean, they really see that as the only way to stop gun crime, or at least the only way to stop individual law-abiding citizens from having a gun.
Is there some sort of gun control measure, gun control law that you think could be passed that would be both constitutional and be effective in reducing gun violence?
The only thing that I can see, and it's not that sexy a solution or easy to do, is the effort to try to make sure that people who are mentally disturbed to the point where they're a danger to themselves or others are being treated properly, that there's some kind of medical treatment for them. And I know that there's been efforts in Congress to try to make sure that there are more hospital beds, that people can be committed voluntarily or involuntarily, but in some kind of humane way. And actually, it's the healthcare community that's pushed back against it, because they feel that if people are going to be reported for their mental problems, they won't no longer go for help. And they just see that as counterproductive. But it seems to me that once we closed all of these institutions for people and left them often on the street to take their own meds, then you have a real problem. And the people that commit mass murders are almost always people like that. There's a lot of gang-related shootings as well. But, I think if we could do something to help people who really are mentally disturbed to the point where they harm themselves and others, that would be a help.
My guest has been Joyce Lee Malcolm, author of the book Guns and Violence, The English Experience. Again, it was published in 2002. Joyce Lee, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's good to talk to you after 20 years.
Well, I must have made quite an impression. Back then. Joyce Lee, thank you so much for coming.
Still in the game doing these things. So thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I must have made quite an impression. Remember in 20 years? No, I sure don't. Yeah, don't have the vaguest idea who the hell you are. I had nothing to do this morning, so I decided I'd do this show, but don't have the darndest idea who you are. I'm Larry Elder.